I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and this episode is all dedicated to our election. We have Lindsay, who's our city clerk, who's going to give us lots of great information. And Andrew Lipsett is here today, not representing the school committee, but some other good stuff that we'll talk about. But first, before we get into that, welcome Mayor Scott Galvin.
Hey, Samantha. Thank you.
I have to give you credit, Scott. You have a good arm. When you were throwing candy out, it was like right to the littles that were sitting with me.
That was good. Yeah, it was a fun day. It was great weather, and I think the Lions Club did really well, and it was one of the better ones that I've seen in a long time. So good day.
The parade's weather could not have been better. We were truly blessed to have that warm sunshine. It was
definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. I also just want to give a thank you and shout out. I know the police and DPW do a lot of work to make this happen. And so that like the next, within a couple hours, you can't even tell there was a parade.
They did well.
So thanks for that. And, for the residents who do a reasonable job of picking up after themselves and not leaving too much behind.
Yeah, I think everybody was respectful. And like you said, the DPW police, they have it down to a science. So they get it, they clean before the parade, and then right after, you wouldn't know there was anything having happened.
Yeah, it's really nice to see that. A couple quick things I wanted to go over with you before we turn the rest of the episode over to election stuff.
Sure.
I know that we've talked about this in the past about hazardous waste disposal, and that historically there were some cities that allowed us to go and for free dispose of things. And we have occasional recycle drives and things in the city, but there isn't some of those cities still are not taking us back and letting us do our routine disposal. Is there anything in the plans for next year, anything we can look at, even fee-based, to help residents have a more consistent access?
Yes, so there is one, and I think you and I talked about this maybe last year, and we got in touch with the Board of Health. Murphy's Waste Oil, which now I think might be Clean Harbors, they're I think either the only ones or one of the few, and we had there's quite a turnaround time because those are in demand, and so we had scheduled one. It's coming up in April. We'll get the exact date, but we will be having that in April, and we'll get the particulars, the dates, and the fees, because there are different costs associated with the type of hazard you bring back. But we have that on the books. We'll get the exact date and start pushing that out there. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you for letting me know. We are so fortunate in Woburn with our waste pickup. We actually, don't have limits on the quantity and have quite a lot of flexibility into the containers and things we use. So when we have this little thing, it's always like, oh, everything else, is there. So it's great to know we'll have another type of pickup happening, and we'll look out.
Well, one of these shows, I'm glad you brought it up, because there is, as we go forward, there's a lot going on in the recyclable market, which the bottom is falling out again. It seems to happen every couple of years, but there's very limited market for our recyclables. And when that happens, we end up paying more for our service. So I think it'd be a real good opportunity if, sometime, not immediately, but in the next couple of weeks, we do something about trash recycling and what goes into the cost of the city. I think it'd be pretty informative for residents to know.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and also to help re-educate all of us on what should really go in recycling. Because I know sometimes if there's a bad thing in a batch, it sort of ruins everything, and they don't sort through it looking for the good stuff in the same way that we did a few years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, we'll definitely do that. The other little thing that I had is, leaves are falling everywhere. And one of the things I know the city always asks us to do is to try and keep things out of storm drains and bag up all leaves, and, try and keep walkways and things clear so people don't have accidents. And we've got a couple of leaf pickup days coming. I just wrote it down. I want to make sure I got the dates. The week of November 7th and the week of November 21st are the dates of those coming. So I just wanted to remind people about that. So
that's good. And that's on the city's website too. If they forget the dates, they should check on there for different types of service pickups. But that's good. And we also have a program coming out that the city engineer is going to get going, and we're going to work with Andrew, probably with the schools. It'll be helpful that they've got a program for students to adopt a catch basin, like a drain, so they keep the leaves off of it. So it's pretty cool program, and we're just figuring out how to get it started. But we're going to partner with the school committee, school department, and get the kids fired up and give them a little learning lesson about the importance of stormwater and keeping it clean and all that stuff. So we're looking forward to getting that going.
That's really fun. I think that's a great way to get people involved in the community
Yeah.
and learn a little something about the water and how all these things, work together and such.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Thanks. Anything else you want to catch up on before we turn to elections?
Real quick, two things, one has to do with recreation. We've got, we finished up one of our last meeting with the open space, plan. I think it went really well. And secondly, we have a meeting coming up, for the design of a skateboard park. So we're gonna do the design now, and we'll fund it with city council. We'll fund it for next year, and we'll hopefully have a skateboard park by, fall of 23. So it's exciting, and we've had a lot of requests over the years and just never really got to it, but this is the year we're gonna finally get a skateboard park, so it's exciting.
I love it. That's going to be really fun. And is that going over where the old Shamrock Pool was, or where do we know where it will go?
We don't know, initially, we're targeting the library field. We're targeting that by, we got the pickleball courts over there, the basketball courts, and the softball, so we're targeting that. We'll be having public meetings to see if any other sites are suggested, but right now we're looking at Library Field, which is a central location, keeps the kids out of the center, keeps them off the library, which they kind of like. So we're trying to give them an area over there, but we'll have public input and see what the public likes. And then lastly, and you can comment quickly, but the PFAS, we have a PFAS notification going out. So it's two things. The third quarter, which is the calendar year, that would have been for the months July, August, and September. We were over, and I say slightly over the 20 parts per trillion. That's the maximum contaminant level. So we're slightly over that. So we're sending out a notice so people know what's going on. The good news is the October results came in at 17. So again, we talk about that seasonal pattern, and we seem to be getting nicked in the summertime, just slightly elevated. But, as I said, we've been testing for almost 3 years now. And on average, over that period, we've been just about 17 parts per trillion, which is under the DEP. But remember, we're still working to remediate down at with the filters down in Hot Pond. So our goal is to eliminate the PFAS, and that's where we're going. But people will start seeing notices going out. And again, if they take the time to read it, then they can call my office at the water department, and be happy to answer any questions. But that will be going out, I think Friday of this week.
Great. Thank you for that update. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's all I have.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Scott. Next up,
Okay,
we're going to turn and talk elections.
guys. Yep.
Lindsay, thanks so much for joining us. Lindsay Higgins, as most of you know, is our town clerk, and we're going to talk all things election.
Thank you for having me. It's that time of year again.
I know, and I know how busy you are getting ready for things. So thank you for sneaking in a little time to answer all of our questions.
No, anytime.
So I know you must be getting sick of this question, but for the first few years I lived here, felt like every time I went to vote, I asked it. So I always want to make sure new people know. If people are not sure what ward they are in or where their ward votes, where can they go look that up?
So the Secretary of State's office is really the best bet if you're online savvy. They have everything on their elections division webpage. So if you go there, you can Google it. It's probably easier than trying to type in the exact location. If you go there, they have a bunch of tiles up on the screen, that ask you online voter registration, where do you vote, all those kind of questions are all on their main screen for the elections division. You can also call us here at the office, 781-897-5850, and we'd be happy to let you know.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. We have 4 questions on the ballot this year, and in addition to all the other things, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I think the Massachusetts book that came through didn't have all 4 questions in it. I might be mistaken about that, but I think I only saw 3 in mine. In any event, I thought it'd be helpful for you if you could just do a real quick recap. What are the 4 questions that people will be asked to vote about?
Sure, and the voter registration, the voter booklet that went out, the red booklet, I call it, you'll see you got it in the mail. You did not have question 4 on it because it came in after the deadline for printing the booklet. But that we do have copies of that in the office now. All questions are located on the Secretary of State website. We also have posted the elections division. I've also posted outside my office. The warrant is there and the specimen ballot, so they're all there for you to look at. The specimen in warrant is also on our city clerk's website on the elections page on the city clerk's website. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. So if you go to the city clerk's the main page, to the right, there's a little, there's a bunch of books. You click browse, you go down and you click on elections, that page will pop up so that you can get to it. Question 1 is called additional tax on income over $1 million. Question 2 is a regulation of dental insurance. Question 3 is the expanded availability of licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages. And question 4, which is not in the original pamphlet, is the eligibility for a driver's license.
And I do encourage you, if you're not familiar with those, to definitely go online and look that up, or go down to the city hall and look those up to make sure people are familiar with them before they go in and have to vote. And if there's anybody who's listening who has involved in any of the campaigns around those questions and you want to share your point of view, feel free to reach out. We've got at least one more episode after this before Election Day. So happy to chat with folks about that. We do have one guest coming on in a little bit. We'll be talking about the first question in particular today. Lindsay, I always am fascinated about the questions that come on the ballot. They're always really different, and they're always from a variety of different aspects of our law and how we live here in the Commonwealth. How do people get questions on the ballot? I know people are always curious, why are these 4 on here this time around?
Yeah, so there's different ways, there's different types of petitions. There's 4 different types. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of it and bore everybody, but essentially some of these came in.
You could never bore us, Lindsay. Don't worry.
Well, the initiative petitions, generally what people see are the ones that you have a core original group of petitioners, submit the question to the Secretary of State's office, and it goes through that process. And eventually they have to get certified signatures from local people, local residents in the district. That's what we do in our office. We certify a lot of those signatures to make sure people are actually living there. Once you get a certain threshold, then they can go onto the ballot.
Great. And we have some important elections this, in addition to the ballot questions, people who are up for election. Remind us what roles we're voting for this time around.
Yeah, so it's on the warrant if you guys want to look at the example warrant. So we have governor and lieutenant governor is one race. We have attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, auditor, representative in Congress, which is 5th district, a counselor, which counselor is actually governor's counselor. People don't realize what that is. That's the 3rd district. We have the senator in general court, which is the 4th Middlesex district. And then depending on what ward you're in, we have representatives in general court. We have the 15th Middlesex for Ward 1, Precinct 1 and 2, and Ward 7. And then we have the 30th Middlesex, which is Ward 1, Precinct 2A, wards 2 through 6. There's also district attorney and sheriff on the ballot as well.
Great. So a lot of important positions that have a lot of influence in what our community is like. So please go, if you aren't familiar with the candidates for those positions, definitely take the time to go check it out and look those things up. Some of those positions are probably sort of accosted with all the time, right? We see lots of communication about them, but some of those positions are less discussed and have less active campaigns. So knowing what they are is super valuable. I know, so obviously some voting is happening before Election Day, right? There's mail-in voting, and then you've had some early voting hours, correct?
Correct. So we had early voting hours last week. This last weekend was the second weekend we had it. The hours were a little different on Sunday because we had the Halloween parade. So for the rest of the remainder, it's at the old Wyman Elementary School at 679 Main Street. So it's the corner of Main and Eaton Ave. Some people call it the Castle School.
That's what my kids always called it every time we walked by.
Yes, people call it that, and you just get a chuckle. But it's you actually go around out back on the Newberry Street side, and you can enter there. It's regular business hours right now, so it would be 9 to 4:30 Monday through Wednesday. And then it is 9 to 7 on Thursday and 9 to 1 on Friday. Friday is the last day for the early voting in person. Another deadline I just want to make people aware of, I don't know when this is airing, but tomorrow, Tuesday, November 1st, is the deadline at 5 p.m. is the deadline to receive vote by mail applications in. We had our voter registration deadline this past Saturday, so it is now too late to register to vote or change your address for the election. But again, November 1st, Tuesday at 5 p.m. is the last day we can receive an application to mail you out a ballot.
Perfect. Thank you. And when are those, are the mail-in applications have to be in the same as live voting, or when do they have to go in the mail?
So they have to be postmarked by election. There's some caveats to this, but they have to be postmarked by election day. So it has to have a postmark of November 8th, and we have to receive it here in the office by November 12th.
And people can also hand deliver them as well, correct?
Correct. So we have a drop-off box out back in the our handicap accessible location. It's attached to our building. There is a camera there, so they can put it in the box there. There is also a general city hall mailbox out there that is not attached to the building, it's attached to the ground. We do check that as well, but we suggest people use the one that's attached to the building. They can also come in and drop it off here in the office. We'll take them, timestamp them, and process.
Great. And you get to say hello to the team. I know they're really busy. They probably are glad to greet people, but also happy to use all those other sources that we have. On November,
and I will say on election day, if you do have a mail-in ballot and you received it, you cannot bring it to the polls. You have to turn it here in City Hall. That's a huge difference. So right now you can turn your mail-in ballot at the early voting location. However, on election day, you cannot turn it to the polls. You have to return it here to City Hall for us to process.
Thank you for mentioning that. I think that's an important one. I can see people might not know that. So that's very helpful. I appreciate it. On election day, on November 8th, what will be the hours that we are open, the polls will be open for voting?
The traditional hours at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. At the various polling locations.
Great. What's the last election cycle? What was our voter turnout? Do you remember the percentage off the top of your head?
It was pretty low.
It was low. Whatever it was, we could do better, Woburn. So this is your this is your quest to get out there and vote.
So presidential elections aside, presidential elections are usually have an uptick, but yeah, it was not the greatest. But we have currently, as of today, we have 28,101 registered voters. So it'll change a little bit when some people get removed off that between now and election day, but we have that about 28,000.
Yeah, so we should be able to show up in force and get lots of people voting. I appreciate that. Now, I know that you mentioned that voter registration is closed for this election cycle, but anyone who might have missed it or who hasn't turned 18 yet, but might be coming up where you're turning 18, they can register to vote, obviously, by coming into the city clerk's office and register.
Absolutely. So we'll have voter registrations at all polling locations. We also have voter registration cards here in the office. The easiest way, though, is, again, the Secretary of State's website, the Elections Division, has an online portal. You can do that. I haven't been on it today. It might have some disclaimer on it because of the deadline has passed. But we will process all those, after the election. They will not be able to vote if they haven't been voted. If they haven't been registered yet, they won't be able to vote in the current election coming up, but they would be in future elections.
Great. And I know I've had a few people ask me to just double check. Are people allowed to bring their children in to vote with them?
I mean, we don't discourage that. So obviously it's people have to have the privacy of voting. So we just respect other people's, right to vote and respect their time. And, but we see kids come in all the time. So
yeah. I have to say it was kind of great to have my children. Usually the lines move really quickly, so they're not antsy and moving around. They just kind of sort of come just with you, and to your point, respect the people around them. But it's kind of fun to see that, part of our lives.
Yeah, I think during COVID, people got away from that because obviously they wanted less people in there. But obviously, we would love to inspire the future voters of the city of Woburn. So
I love that. Lindsay, thank you so much for answering all of my questions. Is there anything that you think people should know that I didn't ask you about?
No, if you have any questions, please feel free to call the clerk's office, 781-897-5850. And just a reminder that in-person voting on election day is November 8th, Tuesday, November 8th. It's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at their respective polling locations. And if you have any questions, feel free to visit our website, the Secretary of State's Election Division website, or just give us a call in the office or stop by and we'd be more than happy to help you out.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much. And please thank all the people who volunteer and work hard and all the people on your team that make Election Day run smoothly for us. It's appreciated all the time.
They're invaluable. All the poll workers, the people in the office, everyone that they work so hard. You know, the as well as like the police, fire, DPW, they're huge and helpful for me setting up for the elections as well. So it's a busy time of year for us, but we get through it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for squeezing in this time with us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Andrew, thanks for joining us as well. I know we just talked to Lindsay and we talked about elections overall. And right now we're going to turn our attention to question number 1. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's great. So I know today we all know you as your role on the school committee. We're so grateful for that. Today you're coming to us as just another resident, an interested person, but not representing the schools in any way, correct?
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although as in my school committee role for one moment, I'm very happy to hear Mayor Galvin mention the schools in connection with the environmental program that you had talked about. So now I'll take the school committee hat off.
I love that. We put it on, we put it off. That's great. That's fantastic. Well, I'm really glad you're here today. Thank you for joining me. I'd seen you had written up some things about your thoughts and ideas, and I thought it would be great to get somebody's perspective on this question. So for those who might not be completely aware, question 1 is about taxing wealthy Massachusetts residents and giving them an increased tax. And I believe it's over $1 million, right? Tell us a little bit about sort of what the core question is about.
Sure. So Massachusetts has what winds up being a fundamentally unfair tax code. So Massachusetts is one of only a handful of states that has what's called a flat tax. So our income tax is 5% across the board. But the problem is that in effect, what that means is that wealthier folks pay a smaller percentage of their income into taxation when you factor in things like property tax, sales tax, excise tax. So what we wind up with is a tax code where people in the top 1% of income earners in Massachusetts only pay about a little under 7% of their income into taxation, whereas folks down the income ladder pay progressively more and more and more, right? So by the time you get to the bottom 20% of income earners, people, folks who are struggling to make paycheck and paycheck, they're paying 10% of their income into taxes in all of their various forms. And what that creates is a regressive tax structure where the burden is on the people who need services the most, not on the people who can provide the most, right? So the Fair Share Amendment is an attempt to address that imbalance. What it does is to create a 4% surcharge tax on incomes once they hit and go over $1 million. So that first $999,999, that is taxed at the normal rate. Once you hit that millionth dollar, you're paying an extra 4 cents on every dollar. And that the proceeds from that tax are, this is a constitutional amendment. So this is not just your average ballot question. This is not something that the legislature can then do anything with. This is constitutionally mandated to go to 2 areas of, I think, really, really deep need in the Commonwealth, and that is our transportation system and our education system. So what that means is that the money that is raised by this tax must go into those 2 areas, and the legislature must appropriate it for that purpose.
Thank you. That was really helpful. This is your history teacher being able to explain this so well. That's one of the reasons I asked you to join, because I knew you'd be able to articulate it very clearly for us, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure if I misheard you, so I just want to make sure and correct this. I thought you said we are one of the few states who has a tax rate system like this. Did I hear you correctly? And if I did, what is a more typical environment?
So generally, so for example, our federal tax code is a progressive income tax, where you do have a structure where, in higher and higher tax brackets, more and more of that money goes into taxation. That is a model that a lot of states follow as well. It's a much generally the latter is a lot lower, so it's fewer tax brackets, but I think it's somewhere on the level of 9 or 10 states have something like a flat tax, and then you have a number of states that don't have any income tax whatsoever. Right? So that's sort of what the overall universe of taxation for states looks like.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that. I want to make sure I understood that correctly. So one of the things that I think people are really curious about is, let's assume it passes. and we implement it in its current form and how it's described, how much money are we likely to raise for, things towards no one is going to complain that we don't need help with transportation. I think we've all seen painfully the result of some real struggles in terms of our public transportation infrastructure.
We have, yeah. And, it's been a tough year for our transportation system. Anyone who drives to work sees the amount of gridlock that we're dealing with right now, sees the state of our roads and bridges. And public transportation has not been a viable alternative for too many people. We have a public transit system that is regularly breaking down. And in part, that's because we have been disinvesting in our public transportation systems and our education systems for the past 20 or 30 years. I know it seems like we keep, the line is we keep dumping money into these programs and they don't improve. But the reality is our budgets have not paced inflation, have not paced the growth in the economy. And so the effect is that we are actually paying less for our transportation and education than we did in the past. So this, if passed, question 1 would create a tax that would bring in, the State Department of Revenue has estimated $2 billion a year in income. And that's just from, we're talking about this tax affecting maybe about 0.6% of Massachusetts residents. So a very small number, less than the top 1%. But even that will produce $2 billion per year in revenue that is going directly into these areas of great need.
Thank you. I think most of us don't realize how many high income earners we have in the Commonwealth. That's actually a larger number than I would have expected.
And when we talk about high income, $1 million, I don't view the threshold at high earner at $1 million a year. That's ultra high earner, right? We're talking folks who are almost certainly billionaires. Not, I don't know that we have anyone in the city of Woburn who would wind up actually, experiencing this tax. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm not, but
that's a good
no one
point.
I know.
We don't know. We don't know that, but certainly it is targeting people who are on the very high end of the income stream. Now, one of the things is that I'm curious about is, that is a very high income today. It's a constitutional amendment. We don't actually know in 50 years from now if it will be. I can't. It probably will be a very high income, but if we look at our housing prices that have changed over 50 years, it may not be. So is there anything in this that protects in the case of inflation that this is adjusted accordingly?
Yes, and thank you for asking that, because I failed to mention that in the original description. This is pegged to inflation, and it's pegged to inflation in using the exact same formula as the federal tax code. So $1 million today, whatever the equivalent of that is in coming years, is what the tax rate will become. Okay. So $1 million is a nice round number now, but
yeah. It is a nice round number now. That's a good point. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it actually hasn't come shouting out clearly to me as I've been, trying to do my own research. I also probably wasn't looking hard enough. So thank you for doing. That's the benefit of me hosting the show. I get to ask all these questions and do all this homework on my own. But I know lots of people have them, so I appreciate it. The other thing that I know a lot of people have asked about is this is based on income. And if I sell my home, and with home prices today, $1 million home, or maybe even a home that I sell for $800,000, I make 200, all of a sudden that puts me at that $1 million threshold. How many people might be affected by that, and what should people be thinking about related to that?
Sure, that's another great question. It's what I've been hearing a lot. One thing that I think is really, really important for folks to understand about this is that this is about income, right? So the sale of a home, the income that's generated from the sale of the home is a gains income, right? So you're looking at this over what it would have to be $1 million in profit over what you paid for the house originally, and anything that you did in terms of investing in that house. So if you renovated your kitchen, if you added a heating system, you converted to natural gas, things like that, those all are seen as investments, right? So it would have to be selling for $1 million over what you paid for it, both in the original housing cost and in any renovations towards it. In addition to that, there are deductions that home buyers can take, up to $500,000 one-time deduction, that would also apply here. So the reality is very, very, very few homes, less than one, I believe it's about less than 1%, 0.89, 0.9% of home sales that have occurred in the state of Massachusetts in the last year might have been affected by this tax. And even there, it's 4% on every dollar above $1 million. So the amount that you're actually paying that tax on is relatively small. Realistically, if you're selling your house for less than for more than $2 million, you have a shot. If it's less than that, probably not.
Thank you for that clarification. I know that's a question a lot of people have been asking.
And it's an important one to answer, absolutely.
Yeah, no, really, I think it is. We all have to be thinking about those things.
Yeah.
The other question a lot of folks have is if it passes, how quickly does it go into effect?
Sure. Yeah, this would not go into effect. You're not going to have to worry about this for your April tax returns, right? This isn't, it will go into effect January 1st, 2023 is when we will start seeing. So anyone who is affected by that will start to see those deductions. And you would deal with it on your April 2024 tax return. So this is for starting in the 2023 fiscal year.
Great. So I'm going to ask what I think is maybe a silly question, but I can imagine that some people are thinking about it. So I'm going to ask it anyways. So one of the objectives of this, as you described really well, was sort of to put a progressive tax structure in place that matches what we do in the federal level and matches what we do in some other states. Another way to get a progressive tax structure would be to reduce the tax on people who are in a lower income versus increasing the tax. Now, obviously that has dramatic impact on budget and infrastructure and a lot of other things, but I did want to give you an opportunity to sort of address that option and why maybe it was not selected.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think the answer to it really is, what we want out of the state of Massachusetts, right? We have a state that people want to live in, right? And the folks who are lucky enough to make $1 million a year, they're choosing to live here, and they're choosing to live here for, I think, really valid reasons, right? We have a state that has a strong economy that allows them to build businesses. We have a state that, where our transportation systems, yeah, they're in trouble, but they are also providing access to a world-class city of Boston and really productive surrounding areas. We have a great education system, although, part of the thing that we struggle with is that it's greater for some than others. So what we're looking to do with this is to make sure that those benefits extend to all of our residents, rather than a wealthy selected few, right? And so the way to do that is to make sure that our revenues are meeting our needs, which right now, unfortunately, they aren't. I know this year is a tough year to be talking about this as we're seeing a budget surplus that's resulting in a return to the taxpayers. But that was, really very much a unicorn of a situation, right? I mean, this is not something we're going to be seeing repeating. This had a lot to do with the federal funding from COVID relief money and things along those lines. So looking 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, how are we going to create a system that allows us to invest in our education systems, in our early education systems, in our higher education systems? We've seen the cost of higher education go up at an astronomical rate over the last 15, 20 years. And that's in large part because we don't have the funding as a state to support what our students need. So if we want to educate the next generation of people who can go and work for companies started by the folks who are making $1 million a year, then we need to be able to support our higher education. We need to be able to support our K-12 schools. We need to be able to build an early education system that works for everyone. We need public transit to help ease our congestion. We need to fix our roads and bridges. These are I think, kind of desperate needs that we have right now. And this revenue is how we get there.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing that information with us. It's really helpful. For those of you who are watching, if you have thoughts and ideas on any of the 4 questions that are there and have informed opinions that you want, we have one more episode before Election Day. And I'm happy to have you reach out to me at todayinwoburn@gmail.com, and we can chat if that makes sense to have you on and chat through it. I'm really grateful for your time, Andrew. I'm grateful for Lindsay's time as always to help catch us up on where to vote and how to vote and all the things that relate to that. And as always, Woburn, please continue to take good care of each other.